HALion 5 is not your average run-of-the-mill sample playback unit. HALion is the ultimate sound designer's tool for creating the most expressive and dynamic instruments, loops, and soundscapes you could possibly think of. The only limit in HALion 5 is your imagination. The main difference between HALion Sonic 2 and HALion 5 is that HALion Sonic is great for loading up sounds and modifying them to suit your needs, but HALion is a complete sound creation system, allowing you to create that perfect patch from the ground up. To understand the basic architecture of HALion, we should have a look at the program tree. The program tree is the main area for navigating in HALion and shows the selected program with all of its layers, zones, and modules. Each element in the program tree is displayed with an icon in front of its name, indicating the type of element. Programs are the top-level elements, and one program combines layers, sample zones, synth zones, buses, MIDI, and effects modules. Often a program contains a single layer that already comes with all the necessary components, such as the synthesis part or insert effects. This is because a layer is already a complete sound structure of its own. Layers can be used to organize programs, for example by grouping a number of zones. This is useful if you want to apply the same settings to a number of zones in one go. The program adds the possibility of combining different layers to build up more complex sounds or to create combinations of sounds you want to load as a unit. A typical example is a bass piano split sound or a piano string layer sound. A zone is the element on the lowest level in the tree structure. The zones are the elements creating the sounds in HALion. You can choose between synth, grain, organ, and sample zones. These zone types differ in their basic sound source and come up with individual functions and parameters. The program tree represents the signal flow inside the program from top to bottom. The MIDI comes in at the top and goes down through the layers and MIDI modules. The processing order of the MIDI modules inside the program or layers is from top to bottom. MIDI modules are an example, the flex phrase or arpeggiator, the MIDI player, and also key switches or megatrig for controlling playing styles and articulations. The audio output is via buses that can have any number of effects modules. The processing order of the effects modules inside the buses is also from top to bottom. When the program tree has the window focus, you can use the arrow keys for navigating in the program tree. To start creating a sound from scratch, clear out any program information that you may have by erasing the program from the program table. Now drag a program from the program table to the program slot and you're ready to start creating a sound from the ground up. For now, let's just start with adding a zone to your program. From here we can decide what that zone is going to be in the global section in the top right corner of the zone editor. We can choose from one of 4 different types: virtual analog, sample, granular synthesis, or the tone wheel organ. The zone editor is built up in different sections that vary depending on the type of zone. The Sections toolbar allows you to customize the section display and to facilitate navigating between the sections. Let's start with the virtual analog synthesis engine that comes with a dedicated oscillator section. The most basic component of synthesis is the oscillator. More advanced synths have a few oscillators, but HALion has not only 3 oscillators, but an additional sub-oscillator, ring modulation, and a noise generator to satisfy even the most experienced programmer. For the 3 main synth oscillators, you can activate the multi-oscillator mode. This mode allows you to create a richer sound by producing up to 8 oscillators simultaneously. The effect is similar to the unison mode for the zone, but it requires less performance. When working with samples, you will find a sample oscillator in the zone editor and the audio warp section for time stretching and pitch shifting of the samples. New in HALion 5 are the grain oscillator and the organ oscillator. Please have a look at the new features video to find out more about these 2 new sound sources. The following features apply to not just only the virtual analog type, but samples and granular synth zones too. As far as filters go, HALion not only has a wide choice of filters in the filter section, but a comprehensive selection of filter arrangements to combine filters in many different ways to achieve your sonic potential. Depending on the filter arrangement you choose, you can select up to 5 different filter types at the same time and morph between filters in the XY morph window. The amp section gives you access to the level and pan settings of the zone and the routing to the auxiliary output buses. The envelope section gives you access to the 4 envelopes of the zone: amp, filter, pitch, and user. The amp, filter, and pitch envelopes are pre-assigned to the amplitude, the filter cutoff frequency, and the pitch of the zone. You can adjust the pre-assigned modulations in the corresponding sections of the zone. The purpose of the user envelope is freely definable. 2 polyphonic LFOs can be configured in the LFO section. Polyphonic means the LFOs are calculated per voice, allowing for independent modulations with each triggered note. You can use this to create a richer sound, for example, with an independent pitch modulation per note. Synth and sample zones feature a polyphonic step modulator for creating rhythmic control sequences. The step modulator can be freely assigned in the modulation matrix. Which brings us to the most incredible feature to me by far, the modulation matrix. The concept of controlling one parameter by another is called modulation. Assigning modulations means to interconnect modulation sources, such as LFOs and envelopes, with modulation destinations like pitch, cutoff, amplitude, etc. This is where you really start making some serious strides in VA designs. Spend a day here in the virtual analog synthesis engine, and you will find that you can do pretty much anything you can do with any other VA synth. When you're comfortable with editing the zones, start adding MIDI modules in the program tree like the flex phraser, layer alternates, or key switches to create more complex patches and instruments. Now let's have a look at the sampling capabilities of HALion 5. HALion 5 can import most audio and sample formats. Please visit the HALion pages on the Steinberg website for a complete list of all supported formats. There are several ways to import samples. You can use the Import submenu in the program tree and let the samples automatically be mapped by obtaining the information about the root key and key ranges from the file or folder names. You can also use the import browser to load samples and programs, or you can just drag and drop samples from your file browser, desktop, or Cubase project right into HALion 5. From the sample editor, you can set the start and end point markers for the sample, the fade in and fade out curve, and length and playback mode like reverse or one shot. To set a loop point for the sample, you have to decide what type of sustain and release loops you want for the sample. The automatic loop detection helps you find the perfect loop, searching for similarities within the sample. And the loop crossfades help you to create smooth loops. HALion also lets you edit your samples in an external editor like Wavelab. Just set up Wavelab in the options menu, and HALion even recognizes the changes that are made in Wavelab to the samples. It will even ask you if you want to update the sample. Perfect integration. New in HALion 5 is the slicing mode that lets you chop your loops to play them back in sync with the host application. The new slicing mode is explained in detail in the new features video. The mapping editor lets you view and edit the distribution of the zones inside a program. All zones are mapped to the key range on the horizontal axis and the velocity range on the vertical axis. Even without the use of the manual, the sample mapping features are self-evident in this clearly outlined and easy-to-use display. Speaking of display, this is one of the most convenient features of HALion. Your screen set can not only be resized to favor certain areas of HALion that you concentrate on, but they can be individually composed to your editing needs. For instance, if you're mapping large programs with multiple samples and sample layers, then maybe you want to view the samples and the mapping at the same time. Simply resize the window, close the tabs you don't need, and choose the editor from the available choices. If you want to use certain editors outside of the main HALion view, you can select to undock the editor, or simply drag the editor from the top left corner out of HALion into its own workspace. When you have an arrangement that you prefer for certain tasks, you can save it as a screen set and recall it later when you need it. I have specific screen sets that I use for specific sound design applications. As you can see, HALion 5 is the perfect tool to design your own sounds, With its modular architecture, you can combine samples with virtual analog and granular synthesis. Add MIDI modules like the Flex Phraser and enhance your sounds with top-notch effects. The flexible structure and well-thought workflows make HALion so popular for sound designers all over the world. Well, we've certainly covered a lot in our HALion 5 Quick Start tutorial. Check out the HALion Sonic 2 videos as well. They're full of relevant information to HALion 5 users. Don't forget to watch the new instrument videos too, as they are the same instruments available in both HALion Sonic 2 and HALion 5.